Am I the idiot for not explicitly telling my grandpa I'm married to another woman? My wife and I are both women in our late 20s. We've been together for 4 years and got married this summer after getting engaged in the spring. Due to restrictions and personal preference, we did a courthouse wedding with each of our sisters as our maids of honor. It was a relatively simple affair and my wife and I are pleased with how low-key it was. Before we got married, I was not out to my extended family members. I was very close with my grandma and was afraid of how she might react. Sadly, she passed away shortly before our wedding, so she never got to know that my wife was more than a friend. I'm not very close to my grandpa, but I do try to call him once a week to chit-chat. He's very reserved and soft-spoken, so our convos are typically 5 minutes of fluff about work and the weather. I had introduced my wife to my grandparents. They met her a few times before my grandma passed away. They only knew her as my roommate friend as I wasn't out at the time. But I would tell my grandma about fun things we did together, and honestly I think she might have known that we were a couple. In retrospect, Grandpa probably didn't pick up on it because I'm not nearly as close to him as I was with her, so when we visited he would say hi and chat with us for a little bit before going in his workshop while we stayed with my grandma in the house. After the wedding, I decided I couldn't hide who I was any longer and posted our wedding pics to social media, saying that we had gotten married and I was happy to spend the rest of my life with the woman I loved. Many of my extended family reached out to congratulate us and the overall response was very positive. For Christmas we send out Christmas cards to all of my relatives with our engagement and wedding. Fast forward to last week. My parents, siblings, wife and I stopped by to visit my grandpa and exchange presents, with masks on. When we got to his house I said, "Grandpa, you remember wife's name?" And he said hi and asked about her parents, and that was that. Everyone was sitting in a circle around the living room, was sitting next to my wife on the couch with my arm on the back of the couch around her while we went around and everyone opened presents. I got a cookbook that my grandma had picked out for me before she passed and I started to tear up. My wife held my hand for a while to comfort me. The next day my mom reached out saying that my grandpa didn't know that my wife and I were together until he saw me hanging all over my wife. I'm sure these are my mom's words. I told her that I genuinely thought he knew, and that if someone hadn't talked to him about it after we posted it on social media he would have realized from the Christmas cards, which featured a close-up of the rings. He had asked my mom about it after the party and she had to tell him. She says it should have been from me. My mom told me it was my responsibility to tell him and that he shouldn't have found out that way. Am I the idiot for not specifically telling my grandpa I'm married to a woman? My mom said it isn't the end of the world, but I can tell she's kind of upset. My wife said that she didn't think any display of affection we did have was not over the top and nothing my siblings wouldn't do with their significant others who weren't present, and a friend said that it's not on me to make sure everyone knows about my marriage. Update: AITA for not explicitly telling my grandpa I'm married to another woman. I just want to thank everyone who commented. I read through them all and it really helped me process the situation. I spoke with my mom a few hours the night after I posted, and she apologized for her comment about my wife and I hanging all over each other. I apologized for putting her in the situation she was in and that I genuinely thought that he had known. She basically said that it was okay, he knows now, and not to worry. She had talked to him and told him that we were together but didn't tell him we were married, which she said needed to come from me. I agreed. I said I was going to give him some time to process and reflect on things, and that I didn't want to reach out too soon before he was ready. I waited a week to talk to him. In that time an aunt of mine said she spoke with him. They spoke for a while and his general sentiment was that he was worried that we could lead happy lives together, i.e., could we find a home? Could we have kids? Would we be able to keep our jobs? She said they had a really good talk and that she was able to reassure him on his worries. She told me I should talk to him and give him a chance to see how happy we are. This weekend I went to visit him. My aunt and mom came with too. After we chatted for a while I told my grandpa that I had some news. I told him that my wife and I had actually gotten married this summer. I made it clear that it was a very small ceremony and that our parents couldn't even attend. And that because of that we are planning on having a big wedding celebration in a year or two after COVID is over so all of our family and friends could celebrate. I explained that I was just nervous to tell him, and that I was worried what he would think. He said, well, I'm 85. My opinion doesn't matter. We talked a little bit more. I made sure to mention that we were very happy, and that our jobs knew and our neighbors knew when we bought our house. I also mentioned that my wife's parents went to the same college my parents and all my mom's siblings went to, and he thought that was pretty cool. I told him that I didn't have a chance to tell Grandma before she passed, and that I really miss her and had hoped she could see how happy we were together. We all had a little cry and talked about how much we miss her. The next morning, a different aunt called me and said that when she went and visited Grandpa he was all excited. Did you hear we're going to have a big party after COVID? OP is having a wedding celebration. She and I had a good talk and it sounds like Grandpa is doing well with the news and that everything worked out okay. Am I the idiot for expecting my depressed GF to clean better? My 22F girlfriend 21F and I have had an apartment together for 4 months now. I'm finding it impossible to live with her BC of her habits, and she says I'm being unfair BC she's depressed. We're still in college and weren't planning on moving in together, but when the pandemic started and we had to come home, everything changed. My girlfriend's parents kicked her out, horrible situation involving abuse. A week later, she lived with my family, then we signed a lease together, with my mom as co-signer because my girlfriend's family has totally abandoned her and she doesn't make enough to qualify a loan. Neither of us is in school right now due to the pandemic, so we're both working until we go back. My parents are fine with me living at home, so I stay at the apartment 2-3 nights per week. My girlfriend has struggled with depression her whole life, but after being abandoned by her family, it got worse. To her great credit, she is making it on her own. She works a full-time job with pretty good pay for someone still in college. She pays rent for the apartment and my family, and I usually pay for groceries, clothes, etc. I'm amazed by her strength and grit. She's the strongest person I know and she makes me proud every day. The issue is that she's an extremely messy person. In addition to having stuff everywhere at all times, and being kind of a hoarder, she makes gross messes. She cracks an egg, leaves spilled egg white and the egg shells on the counter, sometimes for days. She puts pots and plates in the fridge. The whole kitchen smells bad because she never seems to wash all the dishes, and she lets food rot because the fridge is too cluttered for her to notice it. She also literally won't let me throw anything away. This is really just the tip of the iceberg. The apartment's such a mess that it makes me anxious to be there. I have OCD with a lot of food contamination fears, and a lot of the stuff she does triggers it. On my days off I spend the whole day cleaning and organizing her stuff. 2 weeks ago I spent 4 days doing just that. And a week later when I came back, the whole place was a gross mess again. I've asked her so many times to work on it and to keep it clean. She does spend time cleaning, but the problem is she makes such a mess that even if she cleans 2 hours a day, I can barely see a difference. She says I'm expecting too much and not helping her enough, and that her mental illness, depression, plus ADHD, makes it impossible for her to keep clean the way I expect. I say that that's an excuse at this point, and she needs to find a way to be less messy if she can't clean up after herself. It's gotten to the point where I am seriously considering breaking up with her. I don't want to end things, I adore her. But I'm finding it so hard to live with her, and her attitude of I can't help it, I'm too depressed and you should be sensitive is really upsetting because I feel like she's saying that my needs don't matter. Am I the idiot for expecting her to do better? Not the idiot. Your concerns are valid, especially with the food waste issues, and she is dealing with extreme trauma from the pandemic and being abandoned by her family. The question is what to do about it. If we weren't in the virus times, I'd suggest hiring a cleaning service in the meantime, and discussing counseling options with your girlfriend. I did hire a cleaning service a few times when I could afford it, but she hated it. She hates the idea of someone touching her stuff, and she always felt like the cleaner did it wrong. I ended it recently because the place was dirty again after a couple of days anyway, and I couldn't afford more than once a month or so. Not the idiot. She definitely needs a psychologist. If it has only been 4 months and you are ready to cut and run, then you should really consider this. Living with someone is a huge deal and it shows if you can work. If you don't feel like it will, dragging it out will only make the ending break worse. Also, staying for someone's mental health is not healthy. Please don't do that. The thing is, I love her to no end. Before the pandemic, we had been blissfully happy together for over a year. And I still like her as a person. Not the idiot. A part of living with depression, ADHD, and other mental illness is understanding that you have to take steps to treat that illness. Just living in your filth and saying, "Be understanding, I have depression," is the equivalent of limping around with an open wound, using pus everywhere, and saying, "Be understanding, I have gangrene." True, you do have that illness, but you have to treat it, and you're now an idiot for using it as an excuse rather than doing anything about it. Your girlfriend needs help. And I'm labeling her an idiot specifically because she's choosing to use her depression as an excuse rather than a reason to seek help. You wouldn't be the idiot for leaving this situation. It might be the wake-up call she needs to get help. But a less drastic measure might be for you to stop going over there altogether. Stop bailing her out. Let her flounder. And tell her she needs to treat her depression rather than limping on it before you're willing to see her stay at her apartment again.